The nostalgia was strong with this one, but not the acting, nor the writing, nor the directing. In fact, even the special effects in episode 1 of the second season of The Mandalorian, entitled The Marshal, well, they were subpar. I mean, for a year's build-up, this episode on its own was kind of disappointing, and I was sad to say that much of it fell within the traps that I'd outlined in my earlier video when I talked about what I was looking forward to in this season. It relied heavily on nostalgia and the cuteness of Baby Yoda, and I will go into detail of just what I thought about this episode in just a moment, but for now, let me just say, spoiler alert. Welcome to the dantooinefreepress, a home for lovers of science fiction, action-adventure, fantasy, and superheroes. We review movies and TV shows, offer opinions on contemporary issues, and show off our toys and collectibles. We hope you enjoy your stay, and subscribe so you can join us again in the future. Now, the episode started off strong with Mando looking for Kovatch in this seedy neighborhood of some town that seems to be far away from the control of whatever government happened to fill the void after the destruction of the Empire. I thought that the graffiti of the stormtroopers and such was a nice touch. It emphasized that there would be a very robust underground in this universe. And the opening battle between Mando and Kovatch's goons, well, hey, I was impressed with that, although I do have to ask the question, why do people try to punch Beskar armor? Don't they realize they're just going to break their hands? And anyway, I did like that battle scene. I thought maybe this would be an indication of what to expect for the rest of Season 2. And in that scene, we got our first taste of nostalgia. It was a battle between two Gamorrean guards. Although I have to ask the question, it seemed kind of odd that they were fighting with battle axes, but every time they landed a blow, it seemed like it was more of a force field blunt instrument than a sharp battle axe. I mean, I guess they wanted to limit the amount of blood they could shed on a show that is on Disney+, but it's not like they were kidding anybody. I mean, even Kovatch at the end there was saying, "Kill him," to one of the guards who had lost the match. But then, as we learned about the covens where all the Mandalorians are hiding out in all across the galaxy in spoken exposition, Kovatch then gave us our next taste of nostalgia. To find that particular Mandalorian that we're interested in, we have to go back to, of all planets, Tatooine. Now, isn't this a big universe? Aren't there tons of other planets besides Tatooine? I mean, this desert planet, which is far away from everybody in the Outer Rim, it just seems to be popping up so much in Star Wars lore and being so important. Kind of the exact opposite of what Luke thought in A New Hope. Even this tiny little unknown town, Mos Pelgo. And then as the Razor Crest passed through the atmosphere of Tatooine, he passes by, sand people riding on their banthas. I mean, honestly, we're not even 10 minutes in the episode, and Jon Favreau is laying it on thick with all this appeal to nostalgia. And of course, to tie this all back to the first season, Mando lands in the docking bay of the repair shop of Peli Mott, portrayed by actress Amy Sedaris. Pit droids, more nostalgia, followed by Peli Mott reminding us that Mando doesn't like droids. More exposition, followed by yet more spoken exposition. Then we see R5-D4, and that's a droid who would be very familiar if you were a collector of Star Wars toys since the very beginning. Collectors of the original action figure line would have immediately recognized R5-D4. I guess he got that motivator fixed. And what made this scene particularly intolerable was that Amy Sedaris wasn't really doing that good of an acting job. I thought her delivery was rather stilted, and all she did was deliver more backstory. She really didn't put much effort into it. During that scene, I was just cringing at how bad the acting and the directing was. In fact, as we got 20 minutes into this episode, all there was backstory and nostalgia with some comic relief sprinkled in, all at the expense of Baby Yoda. And this violates a cardinal rule of storytelling in a visual media like television. You show, not tell. But all this was 20 minutes of telling. I mean, Jon Favreau, who was the director of this particular episode, it seemed like all he wanted to do was tell us backstory. And that made this episode very tedious to watch. And then we get more appeal to nostalgia. Mando gets a speeder bike, he rides through Tatooine. In fact, as he was riding through the desert planet and then the tiny town, it was fairly clear that this was a green screen effect. The computer graphics were very obvious, and I mean, the first season was a pretty good success. Didn't they have a better budget for special effects? Now, I did like how Mando conferred with the Tusken Raiders on his way to Mos Pelgo. I think that in the Star Wars universe, they often treat the Tusken Raiders as if they're some kind of pariah. It's like they're some kind of dangerous annoyance, worthy of nothing but scorn, since all they do is, well, raid and attack people, seemingly for no reason. I mean, after all, if this race had any sort of value, we would have expected Padme to have a stronger reaction when Anakin confessed that he murdered an entire village just for revenge over the death of his mother. I mean, that was a significant event. It was akin to essentially genocide, yet Padme never brought it up again. It was just brushed off. Heck, she married a guy who was almost guilty of genocide. But getting back to the plot, Mando rolls into Mos Pelgo, which looks an awful lot like a Western ghost town. He bellies up to the saloon where, well, obviously, that's where you go if you want to get information on the people of the town. And I guess it makes sense that The Mandalorian at times resembles the Western genre. After all, the Western genre deals with a frontier of the United States that is often depicted as lawless and far away from the authority of the government in Washington, D.C. Surely we're in a part of the galaxy that again is far away from the government, much lawlessness, and Mando is a lot like the wandering cowboy. And interestingly, the Sand People in this particular episode, well, they were portrayed sort of akin to Native Americans. I was actually very happy to see a greater fleshing out of the Tusken Raiders. In this case, they were the humanoids most in tune with nature on this planet. They were the ones who had to deal with outsiders creeping into their territory, stealing their resources like water, and reacting by raiding the settlements. Certainly sounds like the Native Americans of the Old West, but this episode had a rather trite Western plot. Stranger rolls into town. The big shot of the town doesn't take a liking to the stranger. The two of them are about to embark on a duel at high noon where one of them is definitely going to die. But then a problem comes up and stranger and town big shot have to team up in order to take care of it. Shane, Pale Rider, even Wyatt Earp movies, well, they follow a very similar plot line. And in Mos Pelgo, well, we have more nostalgia. The Saloon Keeper is Weequay, a race that was expanded upon in the Clone Wars and then Star Wars Rebels as we were introduced to the space pirate Hondo. And even as we're introduced to the town's big shot, Cobb Vanth, well, there's more nostalgia. He's wearing Boba Fett's armor. Except it doesn't quite fit. You see, Boba Fett had a more robust frame, and Cobb Vanth, well, he's a little smaller. Maybe that's symbolic, that he doesn't quite live up to Boba Fett's standards. The point being, there's more nostalgia. And then there's more exposition. Vanth tells Mando how he got the armor. And then more backstory on the town. And more backstory on the problems faced after the collapse of the Empire. Exposition, exposition, exposition. And it was during this exposition that I noticed that the actor who was playing Cobb Vanth, Timothy Oliphant, well, he wasn't doing a particularly good job. He was stiff, stilted. And I don't know if that was a directing problem. After all, Amy Sedaris had the same problem when she gave her exposition. But on the other hand, I thought Pedro Pascal was doing a fine job acting. So I tend to lean to thinking that that probably showed me something about Timothy Oliphant's acting ability, or lack thereof. And now the introduction of Cobb Vanth, well, it highlighted a problem that I noted in my earlier video on Season 2, and that is the expectations. You know, the people who went through the trailer, scene by scene, trying to get whatever clues they could on what's going to happen in Season 2, and somehow picked out that on the speeder bike was a package that looked a lot like Boba Fett's helmet. Well, yeah, we got Boba Fett's helmet, except Boba Fett wasn't wearing it. And Mando really wanted that armor, so much so that he was willing to kill Vanth for it. I mean, I guess that's part of the new Mandalorian value system, that nobody who is a non-Mandalorian can wear the armor. Although I wonder, where was all that during the Clone Wars when everyone knew that Jango Fett and Boba Fett wore Mandalorian armor, but weren't Mandalorians? But think back to the opening scene, where Gor Koresh was bragging about how many Mandalorians he had murdered for their Beskar armor. Well, if it really was that important for Mando to recover all of that Beskar armor, why did he just leave Koresh to his fate instead of finding out where the armor was and trying to retrieve it? It's not like he was under time pressure. Tatooine's not going anywhere. And then we saw that this episode wasn't just a rip-off of overused Western plots. Oh no, we get to see a giant worm burrowing through the sand who eats people and other living things. Can anyone say Dune? In fact, if you think about the Tusken Raiders and how they're dressed head to toe living in the desert, well, it kind of brings up images of the Fremen from Dune. Dear Lord, can't we come up with a single original idea? So then everyone is aligned because, well, we just got to get rid of this krayt dragon, both the townspeople and the sand people. And oh, by the way, did you notice that the sound they used for the krayt dragon was the same sound Obi-Wan used to frighten away the sand people back in the 4th episode, A New Hope? More nostalgia. But then, when everyone teamed up to try to kill the dragon, well, the dragon seemed to eat a lot of people. And more than that, everyone seemed rather free to sacrifice the banthas in order to bait the dragons. I mean, it's not like banthas are completely useless creatures. They can be used for transportation, and they provide this great blue milk that apparently has a coconut pineapple-y taste to it. You know, fresh tropical fruit in the middle of the desert. But the real problem here was, even if they're not endangered, how easily they're being used for bait. I mean, they're putting banthas in front of this cave knowing they're going to be nothing but krayt dragon kibble. I'm sure PETA had a problem with this part of the episode. Nonetheless, the rate at which this krayt dragon was able to pick off the sand people and the townspeople, well, it was just alarming. I mean, was it really worth it? Maybe, and just maybe, the better idea, the better course would have been just to leave this dragon alone. You know, just give this poor thing its sacrifice every once in a while and let him have his part of the desert. Or maybe, since we're in a universe where space travel is commonplace, maybe, just maybe, everyone could pick up and leave that godforsaken town and go to a more prosperous planet. And then the krayt dragon can have his natural habitat. I mean, it's not like Tatooine is a very hospitable place to live. And so, of course, we need to see that the krayt dragon has acidic body fluids, and we see that the Beskar armor protected Mando when, well, he was consumed by the krayt dragon. I guess we do need to set up how Boba Fett survived the Sarlacc pit, and then yet another appeal to nostalgia. As the Sand People were butchering the carcass of the Krayt Dragon, we see his huge ribs, and it's reminiscent of the time when 3PO was wandering through the desert, and he wandered past this huge skeleton of a dragon-like carcass in the middle of the desert, back in A New Hope. And then finally, the thing that Star Wars geeks were hoping for. We see Tamora Morris, although aged and this time bald, watching as Mando leaves the town. Although I still caution you. Remember, Hollywood is known to throw curveballs at its audience. He may not be there to play Boba Fett, even if that's how Morrison is listed in imdb.com. I'm still not counting out that Morrison's going to wind up being some other clone that survived all the wars, maybe even Rex. Now, my final thoughts are that this episode really didn't do much to alleviate my fears. It was an episode that leaned very heavily on nostalgia and on the cuteness of Baby Yoda. It didn't have much of an original storyline. In fact, it borrowed pretty heavily from sources such as John Wick or your classic Western or Dune. Right now, I'm very much concerned about how the rest of the season is going to play out. And yeah, I know that's not going to be a very popular opinion. Okay, so if you like this review, please click on this video. It'll show you a review of the last season of the Clone Wars. And if you're the kind of person who likes to see old Star Wars toys restored, well, click on that video. Give us a like, and please share it with your friends. Thank you so much for watching.